It's our weekly sports episode. Well, you might as well call it our infamous podcast about sports and stuff. Where on this podcast, you get to hear a little bit of information about what's going on in the sports world, what's going on in the video game world, a little bit of the technology information, get a little bit of a music knowledge chat, two of our personal faves that we do on the show, the artist spotlight, and of course the infamous ass of the week. So stick around. You might actually enjoy the episode. I just have come to this crazy yet odd confusion or conclusion of some sort. It's gonna make sense in my head in some world that when you think you have things together, that you're gonna be challenged and tested into having those things not work out the way that you want them to. And as life teaches you, you just gotta progress and move forward. So we're just gonna progress and move forward. Past podcast, back at it again. Had a little bit of a technical issue, kind of having to revert to something a little different that I haven't used in a while for personal indifferent reasons, I guess is the best way to describe it. But regardless, we still got a show to do. So I wanted to sit down, talk with you all, give you the weekly update of sports, talk about a few things in the tech world. I kind of initially had an ass of the week. I may modify that. I'll see how I feel when I get to the end of the episode, because I usually try to stick to my no politics flow, but we know that's not been a successful treat lately, but that's neither here nor there. But I will, before I start, well, first I'm going to do some, I guess you can call it some house cleaning duties or whatever you want to call it. First and foremost, I do make sure that I'm giving credit. Chris Rock, CHRSROX photography. She was able to grace me with some worthwhile photography, so I'm, making sure as a man of my word that I get her out there with her business. So if you check her out, she is on Instagram. If you go to Chris Rock, CHRSROX photography, that'll take you to her photography page, and then you'll see her website on her Instagram. I believe she has Twitter, and it's kind of a just work with her, because she doing her thing. That's the best thing I can tell you. If you want to see some of the work she's done, you can definitely go check out my Instagram on past podcasts and check out a few of the photos there. So that's one part of housework. Past podcast website might be a go soon. We're going to keep our fingers crossed with that. Hopefully that turns out as a good end result, and we'll see what happens with that. The last and final thing is, as always, the past podcast is, I'm not going to say sponsor, but we do use the Blue Yeti microphone. This is my microphone that I guess I've considered as my go-to, even regardless of what program I do decide to use, whether it's GarageBand, Audacity, Adobe Audition, whatever. It still causes me to come out with a pretty good sound, and oddly enough, extra sound effects that you all may not need to hear, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. And of course, the podcasts are stored on Spreaker.com/Brate Podcast. You'll hear that at the intro and an outro, but I always like to make sure I mention it during the episode. And one last thing, and I'm going to go ahead and make this clear, because I do want to work on getting this done over the next few days. I am going to be allowing I will have it so that the podcasts, as they're recorded and uploaded, you'll be able to access them on the website. I'm still getting my feet wet and getting a feel for getting that all implemented, but trust me, best believe once that gets going and once that's off the ground, you should see nothing but progress and positive results in regards to that. So I believe I have all of my house duties taken care of in reference to those things. And I'm sorry, one last thing. Podcast will sound a little different this week. Number one, I don't have my co-host. A little upset about it, but it is what it is. I'm hoping he's okay. I'm handling his BI. It's going to be coincidental, because there is a part that I want him for, but knowing me, I'll probably relive that whole moment, because we talk about it, and I'll get into that later on. But I am, like I said, I'm doing the show solo, which is never a bad thing. So I just wanted to make sure I address that before I go any further. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and have our, I guess you can call it our field day with this week's past podcast. And the first topic up for discussion of all things, I'm glad, I guess, by having the news kind of update the story as it occurs makes it a great thing, because it's been confirmed and it's been made clear that Kawhi Leonard will be out for Game 3. There was speculation yesterday whether he was going to play Game 3 or not, and it was confirmed that he's going to be out for Game 3. Coach Popovich didn't make that announcement today. And it's a big hit, and I guess it's kind of being, I'm not going to say it's exposing, but it's kind of presenting the obvious, which I think people need to accept, which is the fact that the injury that Kawhi had in Game 6 of the Western Conference semifinals is catching up now, because that was the same injury that he re-aggravated. In this case, it was a little bit different. He injured himself for a three-pointer, and Zaza Pachulia happened to land on his, Zaza Pachulia's leg was under him when he landed, so he landed on his he sprained his ankle. And I guess I need to add this because I didn't talk about this when I initially was attempting to record this podcast. He had his injury was somewhat equivalent to an injury that Kobe Bryant experienced with Jalen Rose. And Jalen Rose mainly looked at it as a karma injury because after that, I think he was later in the initial injury happened when he was in Toronto. The injury, the repercussions of the injury exposed themselves when the Lakers played Toronto and Jalen Rose was playing for Toronto, and Kobe Bryant scored 81 points in that game. So just one of those things to think about. But I always love when I record a podcast and make an error and then I have to add like a random little statement in to explain something that I messed up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in this portion. And I just want to go ahead and let you know that I did not make this error on purpose. I listened to it just now and realized that it really didn't make sense. So I was talking about Jalen Rose as far as his experience or encounter with Kobe Bryant. I stated that the first time they played against each other, they were in Toronto. And that was false. The first time they played against each other when Kobe got injured, Jalen Rose was actually in Indiana. And Kobe came down on Jalen Rose's foot and he was injured. And of course, when they played each other again, he was still a Laker. Kobe was still a Laker, but Jalen Rose had then went to Toronto and he caught 81 points. So I just want to make sure I clear that up. I'm going to go ahead and get you all back to the podcast, but I wanted to add this in before I continue. Thank you. Injury is more severe than they're kind of presenting it to be, and they want to make sure that he's at full strength. I think, if anything, Greg Popovich is being more considerate and thinking of the big factor of not just Game 3, Game 4, Game 5, but also next season, because he wants to have him at full strength next season, since there's a strong likelihood they'll make a playoff run. One player who's not mentioned and one player that needs to be addressed and pointed out in this series is going to be LaMarcus Aldridge. Aldridge is in a very unique position, and I'll explain why. There's this expectation on him to be the go-to guy, but he's not a go-to guy. One of the Spurs role players is kind of being put in that same position as well, and the toughest part for him is he's not really a go-to guy. He's a role player. Aldridge is not really considered a role player per se, but the difference is Aldridge has head on was in Portland for a while when Damian Lillard went out. But it's mostly been, he's kind of been a support player. Like Pau Gasol, even with Pau Gasol in San Antonio, you're not getting Pau Gasol when he was traded from Memphis and going to LA pretty much for a bag of beans and a pencil. He was traded for his brother at that time, and it actually worked out as a good trade in the long haul. So you're looking. So now with this series being the way it is, currently San Antonio is ahead 2-0, and we're now carrying over to Golden State's side of the game, where you're in San Antonio having to pull off, get 2 more wins, possibly sweep the Spurs, and potentially run into a rematch of the last 2 years of the NBA Finals, which I'll get into that in a moment. But sad. Okay, never mind. Sorry. I don't know. I feel as though how can I put this? The Spurs are a good team, but with Kawhi being out, Kawhi's confirming why he's a candidate for most valuable player. And not having him in rotation really shows that. The Warriors have been at full strength for the past 2 series. Against the Jazz, it was not really a big deal. Against the Blazers, I found it interesting because when they played the Blazers, there was a story about Damian Lillard saying that they would win it in 6, and of course we saw that they didn't win a game at all, but it was the Blazers, so it was kind of a tough shake in a sense. But that's going to be, it's nothing we can really go back and look at now. And I'm sorry, I didn't state this now, and I guess I got house rules, and I was like, it's one other rule. All right, so I'll explain this one last part, and then I'll continue with the playoff story, because I do want to address the Zaza Pachulia story, because I found an interesting story that could have been asked of the words. I did it earlier, I'm going to state it again. You have your major 4 sports. I'll throw 5 to be fair, since I'm a soccer head. You have football, basketball, baseball, hockey, and soccer. Right. And it was a tough hit because they were at home for both of those type. Understand what you have to keep in mind as a fan of a sport or a fan of a game is that if your team, a speculation or assumption of saying, no, you got to stay loyal to your team. No, that's not really the case. Stand with a team winning, a team can also lose as well. So that's something that I think as fans, it's forgotten, but it has to be acknowledged. And I just wanted to make sure I say that before I come in the sports group that I'm in, or sports group that I run, where if a team, when it comes to fans are current fans. Fans become consistent when they find it beneficial to be consistent, and that's in the sense of, do they know who was the dominant playing basketball before Jordan? Do they know, about Bill Russell winning multiple championships in the NBA? Does anybody even remember Terry Bradshaw winning the championships he won before Tom Brady was the biggest name in football? Like, most people go by the here and now, so they don't really know the history or what got things to that point. Like, everyone knows that the Boston Red Sox have won, pennants recently, or won World Series, in the past couple of years, or even the Cubs winning the World Series. But no one remembers the curse of the Bambino. No one knows the curse of the GOAT. No one knows about Steve Bartman. Like, things that are those stories aren't really known or addressed until we get that backstory about them. And side note, one other side note, and I'm going to get back to the current playoff situation. If you have not watched ESPN 30 for 30 One and Not Done, I would highly recommend watching it. I finally watched it a couple of days ago, and I was in love. That show is everything. And I'm not saying it as a fan of college basketball. I took off my Kentucky hat and really looked at it and understood what Calipari is doing. Calipari isn't doing anything that's wrong. People don't like what he's doing because when the rules modified, he went along with the rules, and then it was a benefit for him because he was at a bigger school to be able to do so. Like I said, I don't want to tell too much of it because if you watch it, you'll fully understand it, such as him being at Memphis, him being at UMass, him being at Memphis, and then being at Kentucky, how the dynamics were completely different, even with him being in the NBA, and it wasn't really his best strong suit, but he learned from it, and he's turning out now to be one of the top coaches in college basketball. So check that out if you have not seen it already. Now, as with going back to the Kawhi Leonard injury, there's 2 sides to the injury. There's the injurer and the injury. We've talked about the injury. Let's talk about the injurer, who is Zaza Pachulia. For whatever reason, there's this benefit or idea to believe that what he did was dirty, or what he did was with bad intentions. It was so bad to the point where someone literally filed a lawsuit for a restraining order against Zaza Pachulia to not be able to play in the remainder of the conference finals. The judge in Texas, oddly enough, denied it, which I'm still trying to figure out how was it even able to go through, but that's another story. It's nothing that you really can like expect to really go through, but it's a tough battle because what's crazy about it, and I'll say this now, Leonard out for Game 3 is going to be massive because him not playing means you still have Golden State at full strength. Iguodala's kind of been in and out, maybe play, maybe may not play, but even still, it's not a huge damper to their team strictly because they still have other players who can actually play. So if San Antonio does not get Game 3, prepare for a sweep. Just putting it out there. Because initially I said if Leonard plays or if there's a possibility of him being able to play, then I can see a series. But now with it changing and the dynamics adjusting the way they have, I don't see them getting the game. And it's nothing against who the Spurs have. It's all about leadership. And then even worse, I mean, you got Ginobili's at the end of his career. Tony Parker maybe has a couple of years left. You don't have that team that came through that was winning championships every other year. Danny Green hasn't really shown up. He's been there, but he hasn't been there. So it's kind of been a rough series with Golden State. With Houston, it was a different story, but Golden State is a different team. And that's just something that's forgotten. But do I think that the play Pachulia did was with harm or recklessness or anything of that sort? No. You can't really forecast or project what a player will or won't do in a game, especially when it's an in-game situation. And sometimes what we miss, and we talked about this last week on the podcast, Dimitri and I did, where you have to be able to remember that the game goes at a regular speed. When we see it on TV, we see slow motions, we see edits, we see adjustments, we see it from different angles and perspectives. We don't see the full gist of what happened. So we don't know what could have went on. You don't know what could have been said. It's anything of those sorts. But in that case, I don't feel like Pachulia was trying to harm him or hurt him to the extent of him not being able to ever play basketball for the remainder of the playoffs. That's just logically not going to make sense. But then again, Popovich is on a by any means necessary type of coach to win. And if you look back at it, history always repeats itself because anyone who remembers, Tom Brady went through a similar situation when he was obviously he's been with the Patriots his whole career, but there was one year where Tom Brady was playing and he went to throw a pass and the court and one of the defensive backs, a defensive lineman hit him below the ankle. Oh, I'm sorry, below the knee. I don't know why below the ankle. You ain't got much left. He was hit below the knee, and it was like you rolled into him, and he was out for the remainder of the season. And so it was like a hoax, and it was screwed, and they thought it was just messed up. But it was like, I mean, what do you expect to happen? It's football. For all that, you might as well just let the quarterback wear flags and just put a shield around him while he's throwing the ball. Same with, and with basketball, it's a similar scenario. Like, you can't sit and put players in pads and comfort gear and think that's just going to avoid or stop injuries. Injuries can happen at any moment, and we sometimes forget that. So that's what I want to say about that series. I know I've been addressing and kind of dodging the story involving the Spurs and the Warriors, but I wanted to get into that story before I forget. So the next topic is related to the Eastern Conference of the series, Eastern Conference matchup between the Cavaliers and the Celtics. First things first, Boston forgot there was a game yesterday. Yesterday was game 2. It was in Boston. They lost by 44 points. And by a certain point, it was almost like they were out there just doing layup drills and just kind of relaxing. And that happens with basketball, but the way it happened, it just was unexpected. And it was tough because there really wasn't a true way there was a way to do so, but it almost looked as though Boston just was not with it. And then it was even worse because Isaiah Thomas got injured. He got a technical at one point. I believe Brad Stevens got a technical. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Isaiah Thomas got injured in the first half. And it was just a cakewalk. Even LeBron was toying with Kelly Olynyk. He did that in game 1, but when he did it in game 2, it was like, oh gosh, this is just not. It was like watching Deja Vu was just never a pretty sight, and in this game it was no exception. The conversation then came about whether, why, with the NBA with the MVP voting coming soon, why is LeBron left out of the conversation? And we'll talk about that as well, because I feel like I talked about this on a podcast with Shop Talk a while back, and he addressed, it was addressed as far as LeBron was in the running, but it was a coincidence because at the time when we were talking about it, he was third, and Kawhi we had fourth. But now it's in reverse, and it's like it's an odd instance because you would never, if any point, see LeBron be in the fourth position, let alone usually the top 3, if not number 2 or number 1. So the series, I mean, I will be the first to admit it's gonna. I'm gonna say it like I did with the Western Conference. Game 3 is in Cleveland. If Cleveland blows a game, I mean, blowing game 3, I mean, it's possible. It's just a matter of how team plays. But Boston just is not, like, all of the dirt and the grit that Boston put in the game, like games 1 through 7 with Washington. They left it. They don't have it with this team, and it's just an odd scenario. But hey, that's the way the game is sometimes. So I'm gonna now jump into the great news, since, like I said, and it's 1, 2, and 3, and I'm gonna say this before I go any further. When it comes to the draft, it's always a unique instance that something happens or how history repeats itself, but it repeats itself in a unique circumstance, and I'll explain why. I'll explain what I mean in saying that. If you go back to last year's NBA lottery, Philadelphia had the first pick. Philadelphia got Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons didn't play a game during the regular season. With trades, with acquisitions, with things kind of going the way it did, Philadelphia got the third pick. Do you know who the third pick was last year? Don't worry, I'm going to give you a little bit of time. It was Boston. So it was a coincidence that the turn of events were in reverse this year based on trades, as well as just how the game went. And the number 2 pick last year, oddly enough, was the Lakers pick. Lakers did pick Brandon Ingram. And they brought up some, I was looking at Complex News, and I'm starting to kind of get into them a little bit more. Complex News addressed the fact that you had 2 number 2 picks come to the Lakers last year and the year before. And this year, in those 2 years of having those guys play, you won 43 games total. Whereas you had the Warriors win 48 games this year alone. So just put that in your head and just think about that and just let that kind of marinate for a second. And while that's breaking down, I'm going to go ahead and mention the lottery picks as they were selected. 14, most of the picks were kind of scripted as expected. 14 was the Heat, 13 was the Nuggets, 12 was the Pistons, 11 went to Charlotte, number 10 was Sacramento's because New Orleans involving the DeMarcus Cousins trade, 9 was Dallas, 8 was New York. They went a little lower than I expected, but it'll work out in the end and I'll explain why. 7 went to Minnesota, 6 was Orlando, 5 was Sacramento, and that's based on the trade with Philadelphia. So technically, Sacramento could have been the third pick. Or Sacramento could have gotten the third pick. But that was involved in, when you involve trades and you involve picks, then you get what you get. 4 was Phoenix. Phoenix has another chance to rebuild. They need to rebuild because Bledsoe and Booker are going to be burned out this year. They traded away Tucker, so that was already making it clear where the future, their focus is. And as I mentioned earlier, Philadelphia third, LA second, Boston first. LA needed the second pick. LA needed the top 3 pick. LA got English. LA needed a top 3 pick. They were able to get the second pick, or they're going to get the second pick in the draft. I feel like this is a good thing. my obvious question, and everyone's going to want to know because I know I've talked about this and I've addressed it, and I'm that guy that's going to be honest. I see them getting Lonzo Ball. I don't see them. If they get Lonzo, it's like a half and half. If they do something with D'Angelo Russell, they'll get Lonzo Ball. If they keep D'Angelo Russell, it won't be a point of keeping both of them, especially if you have Jordan Clarkson there. The thing that Ball brings to the game that no one talks about is his talent. He actually can play basketball. What hurts him is his father, and I'll go over that later on in the podcast based on the Ass of the Week. You'll see why, and it'll all make sense. But Lonzo is a good basketball player. I'm not going to say he's great. You can't really put great yet, especially with him blending and coming into his rookie year. Rookie years for players are always up and down because you never know what can happen with a team or with a player. This year was a perfect example. Joel Embiid had a great rookie campaign despite the fact that this was his second year, because we're still waiting to see Joel Embiid at full strength or full capacity. And I think as long as he's able to, as Philadelphia says, trust the process, then it should be okay. Ben Simmons next year is going to be a problem. And they've made stories and talks of him gaining a little height during the offseason, so that'll be something to definitely keep an eye on. But I know for a fact that, I'm not expect, like, I'm going to say this straight up. I don't expect Philadelphia to make noise as far as getting to the playoffs. I see Philadelphia at least winning 30 or 40 games. Playoff bound, way too early. Way too you're speculating or reaching too hard with that. So we'll keep, like I say all the time, that's going to be a story to keep an eye out for and make conversation out of when it occurs. But wanted to at least address and bring that to the attention of the masses. So I'm going to get into the finals or the NBA awards in a moment, but I do want to talk about two commits that have finally declared where they're going to be going to school. I feel like they were delaying their choice of school because they're not going to be there but a year. First story is Trevon Duval. He is one of, if not the top point guards in the country. Trevon Duval has been balling out of his mind, literally. He came from IMG Academy. He was kind of in between about wanting to make the decision because he was trying to figure out whether Frank Jackson was going to be in the draft. And it worked out good because he did confirm that he's keeping his name in the draft. So by him staying in the draft, and that's tough because I don't see Jackson being a high pick unless someone has good footage of him from high school, because he didn't play much during college. But Trevon Duval, when he was with IMG Academy, he played out of his mind. His school, the selections he had were Baylor, Seton Hall, Arizona. There were a couple of other schools, but Duke was where he ended up choosing. He's going to be joining Gary Trent Jr. as well as Wendell Carter. And it's going to work out good for them because they have, with Jason Tatum, Luke Kennard, Jackson, Harry Giles gone, Emil Jefferson, Matt Jones, they're gone. You have Grayson Allen still there, so that works out in their favor. It's just, I'm looking forward to how this is going to go. I don't like it because they always do comparisons, and they pick the wrong players to comparison. They compare him to Derrick Rose, so we just hope he doesn't get injured. But I feel like Trevon Duval is going to be a good pickup for Duke. He was ranked number 5 overall in the class. He's short, he's 6'3", but he can shoot, he can drive. He's a good distributor, but he's more so known for his scoring. His scoring is far none. Like I've watched videos of him, and it's a highlight reel, but I think at Duke he'll be able to cement his recruiting for the NBA with no problem. So I would say 1 year, 2 years max. If he stays after his freshman year, it's solely to improve on his game and to possibly solidify his draft stock. And speaking of draft stock, because I almost killed myself, one of the other top prospects, and I believe he was the number one. Well, no, he's not number one. I want to say he is. Let me get the exact number because he was. Let's see. Number 3, Mohamed Bamba from New York. When I say a raw talent that can actually play, that's the best way to describe him. Mohamed Bamba from New York. He played basketball there, and he has declared, and he's a Harlem native. He will be going to the University of Texas, or Texas University, playing under Shaka Smart. I'm not too fond of that since the whole VCU Texas thing, but I digress. He's coming in a good place because Jared Allen is leaving. He's left. He's going to the NBA. He has an agent, and with their point guard possibly coming back, Andrew Jones, he's still kind of in between, but I could see him probably coming back because he's not projected as a high pick, but you never know. It's all a matter of who's in your head. And then Tevin Mack, with him leaving from Texas due to suspensions multiple times, it worked out better for Bamba to be there. There was a game that they showed, or there was a game I looked at on YouTube. I saw highlights for it where they were playing against Jalik Felton, who is one of the top recruits that's going to North Carolina. He wasn't top recruit as far as All-American, but he's a top recruit, and then he's the nephew of Raymond Felton. But Jalik Felton and Mohamed Bamba were playing. It was a game, full game, 5-on-5. But you see Jalen Felton, hit threes, go to the hole. And Bamba, he hit a few mid-range numbers. I'm not expecting him to shoot threes, but he can shoot the three, which is even more of a huge advantage. But in the game they showed, around the rim, you put the ball near the rim, he's going to catch it, number one. Number two, he's able to get the ball and create his own style of scoring. And for his size, the biggest thing that he'll have to work on, which that's something that you always work on to get as you play, is his weight. He's not very heavy weight wise. I guess that's the best way to put it. But because of him not being very durable in that category, he's more agile. I guess that's the best way to describe it. He has a unique game. His talent is different. He's very humble. He's very, from what I've seen with him playing, he's pretty soft spoken, and I just know he's gonna bring a good aura to Texas basketball. I'm gonna go ahead and be blunt and say it now. He's gone after a year. I'm not even going to hesitate on looking at it as such. I believe on Draft Express they had him in top 5. Trayvon Duvall was in top 5 as well. Keeping it kind of consistent, there's a likelihood that Michael Porter Jr. is going to be number 1 as long as he has a good year at Missouri. He doesn't have to have a great year because, we've seen Karl Anthony Towns be a number 1 pick and not even, he was a smirk over 10 points a game, and it worked out. Just you see how it worked out for his career. So as I mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and talk about on June the 26th, they will be announcing the participants, or they will be announcing the winners of the NBA Awards, 2017 NBA Awards, which is going to be hosted, if I'm not mistaken, by Drake. And they have the finalists listed for each award. Disclosure, I'm going to give who I believe is going to win these awards, and give a little bit of a rant and rave. And like I said, this is where I wish I had the co-host, because we talked about this a lot, and the feeling of why is it being delayed or pushed back, because normally it's being done during the the awards are usually handed out well before this point. And I'm sorry, before I do that, I want to say another thing basketball wise with the NBA. The NBA unveiled their all NBA teams, first, second, and third. When I say they got it as wrong, they got it as wrong without trying to get it as right as they could. That's literally the best way I can describe it. They had a listing of everyone who was chosen per team, per player, whatever, things of that sort. And there was a listing that showed what they created, which was called the All NBA Snub Team. The All NBA Snub Team tells everything on every level. The individuals they had were Karl Anthony Towns, Gordon Hayward, Chris Paul, Paul George, and DeMarcus Cousins. The one player that's missing from the list that I'm still trying to understand is Kyrie Irving. I'm trying to figure out how Kyrie didn't make the All-NBA first, second, or third. For first team, it was Harden, LeBron, Westbrook, Kawhi, Anthony Davis. Kind of saw that one pretty obvious. Wouldn't really go against it too much. All-NBA second team was Gobert, Steph Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kevin Durant, Isaiah Thomas. Slightly debatable because Greek Freak had a good year, but to put him all NBA at forward above some of the names who were in the class, got questions. Third all NBA team, Draymond Green, questions. John Wall, Jimmy Butler, slight questions, but not many. He earned it, so I wouldn't take it away from him. DeMar DeRozan, questions, and DeAndre Jordan, questions. I'm just glad that they didn't do it, but I wouldn't have been surprised if they did. If they added Blake Griffin, then I would have really been confused, even though he didn't play most of the season. So I guess that's why he didn't make it. But I just want to talk about that and going to the NBA All-NBA team. I will make sure to put that in the listing. I'm going to go back and, I always, as y'all know, let's go back and listen to the episodes just to make sure nothing was missed, nothing was skipped over, nothing was disregarded, nothing was left out of the loop, etc., etc. So with the finalists for the upcoming awards, most valuable player finalists: Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard. Westbrook should win. There's no reason to give it to Harden, even though Westbrook lost in the first round, because Harden lost in the second round. Westbrook should get it hands down. Kawhi Leonard is a confirmation of how valuable he is playoff-wise, because not having him this year has been a huge impact during the playoffs. Rookie of the year. And I'm trying to figure out how is he left out, and I'll go into this in a minute. Dario Saric, Joel Embiid, and Malcolm Brogdon. Not sure how Buddy Hield got left out of this list, but it's not my list, so I can't say anything. Who do I believe is going to win? I would probably say Joel Embiid, because he's had a pretty solid season despite not playing half of the year. You really didn't have a lot of rookies who made a lot of noise this year. I'll just say it like that, and I guess that's the nicest way to put it. Going into Defensive Player of the Year, this is a tough one. Kawhi Leonard, Rudy Gobert, and Draymond Green. Gobert is 1A, and Kawhi Leonard is 1. I would give it to Kawhi Leonard because he's played his butt off this year. Six-Man Award, love this one because it's just a unique circumstance. Eric Gordon, Iguodala, and Lou Williams. Nothing against Iguodala. You had a good year. You had a quiet year, but it was not huge. If I was taking a pick, and I'm not doing this as a Houston fan, I'm doing this as an honest observation, I would say Lou Williams should get it for six-man. Most improved player, Gobert, Nikola Jokic, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I would probably give it to the Greek Freak. And it's very close because Gobert had a he progressed and improved this year as well, especially with the Jazz having the type of year they did. Most importantly, being able to beat the Clippers in the playoffs. I know it's based on regular season, but playoffs wise, I mean, if not factoring in playoffs, I would likely give it to Gobert. Coach of the Year, Spoelstra, D'Antoni, Popovich. Obvious purposes, you could give it to Popovich. Unbiased but honest, I would give it to D'Antoni. Spoelstra had a good year. They didn't make the playoffs. They missed by a couple of games, but they still were able to work with what they had despite no LeBron, no Wade, no Bosh, especially with everything going on with Bosh. Still thinking about whether he's going to play next year. Of course, that's another story. Let's see. And I think that, those are all the stories. So So yeah, those are the awards. We'll see what those end results turn out being when we get to them, but that is where we are with the awards for the NBA. So now we're gonna do our stuff. So if you were here for sports, I appreciate you tuning in. I have one other story that's going to be near the end, so if you want to record or skip to that point, you're welcome to, and you can check it out and listen at your earliest or in your own time. So, in the techie world, there's a huge outbreak and a huge worry because the developer for MP3 files is going to be discontinuing a once known sound format. So any of my techie heads, anyone who listens to music, matter of fact, anybody who used to download music, or anyone who has owned an iPod, a Zune, a generic MP3 player, now speaking of which, I have to work on one myself, they know all too well about the infamous MP3 epidemic. And it was a point where MP3s were the thing. Everyone wanted, if you got a CD, you would burn a CD, you would rip a CD, rip it into MP3 format, or burn CDs from MP3s, convert it to a WAV file, and then telling a lot of techie talk for some of you all. But MP3 age is now over. The digital audio codec announced that it's going to be ending the agreement, looking to go more versatile in the audio formats and the standard 4 audio files. So in other words, and I guess the best way to put this is, most people are using AAC, which is with iTunes, you get AAC files. Most people really don't keep single MP3 files anymore, like talking about it. They're available as needed. But typically when listening to music, the average person who listens to music is mostly going to be in the streaming world. And there's no pretty way to put that. I personally have reached a point, and it took me a while because I was indifferent about it. I was the Pandora listener. I had Pandora. I still have Pandora free. I would listen to it from time to time. But now I am guilty, and I am the avid and true listener of the streaming services. I have, like I said, I listen to Pandora once in a while, but I have Apple Music. Apple Music, you can stream anything, anytime, as long as you're on the internet. Most people, anyway, when they're using devices, they're on Wi-Fi 24/7. So it's kind of one hand feeding the other. It was an innovation. It was a revolutionary innovation at its time when people were looking for compact and shareable devices or shareable media. But now, not many people really share media to the extreme. And it's now a lost compression. And here I'm gonna tell techie information behind the scenes that a lot of you may or may not know about or wouldn't even think of, but it kind of ties into the point. Most people who do podcasts, and I could be wrong, they may correct me on this, they save it in like the preferred saving format is WAV, because if you save it in a WAV file, you can edit and work with it a lot better. When it's saved as an MP3 file, it becomes what's termed as lossless, or it doesn't have the same quality. You as a listener, or you as the end user, and this is even with people, even with myself, when I listen to music, you're not going to really notice a huge difference, because you're looking at it as long as I can hear what I need to hear and I'm getting the quality from it, I'm okay. A couple of years ago, probably over a few decades now, I was working, I had a job working at a location. I'm not going to say any names, of course, but I was working there, and I had someone who worked with us who had this idea, a logic of, if you take an MP3 file and you transfer it and you send it, you keep sending it to people, or you keep burning it, or whatever the case may be, does the file lose its quality? The answer is, realistically, it doesn't. It's going to stay the same. There's not much modifying that's going to be done to the file. It may be modifications as far as how it sounds in different locations, but all in all, it's going to still be an MP3 file. So that doesn't change when it comes to the MP3 file itself. But yeah, most people, like I said, AAC, wave files, stream. I mean, most of your streaming products, uh, like as they're mentioning, the format was among the first to make music easily downloadable. It helped Apple become a dominant force in music devices and distribution. That was where the iPod and the iTunes repelled and the company, pushed the company to the top of the industry. That's changed now because most people don't. It's almost like you have to be educated on really thinking through what you're doing. And I'm going to explain. This is a numbers thing, and I'm going to give you all some very helpful information if you have iTunes or if you listen to music, if you download music or whatever. If you download music and you get it how you get it, I have no knock against you because I don't forget where I came from. I'm going to say that first and foremost. The second part of it is when you're downloading singles or albums from, say, iTunes or Spotify or whatever the case may be, because I think Spotify now has their premium service, and SoundCloud is even joining on to the premium service. Getting certain features and getting some music is cool or okay, but it's better. I mean, if you're at the table, why not get the whole hog and go ahead and get everything? So for the $10 a month that I pay, and for the amount of music that I can listen to, I don't regret the decision, and I don't really have a big issue with it. Now, one thing that's important, and I'm guilty of it now because I think my subscription ends soon, is when you first set up Apple Music, you get 3 months free. So you can try it out for 3 months, and if you like it, by all means, stick to it. So far, I'm under my second 3 months because I got it in December. So January 24th or 25th, I'm going to get the reminder of, hey, your 3 months is about to end. If you want to cancel, you can. But I have an account that still has a balance on it, so I'll get another 2 months, and then after that, it'll probably be like August or September when I'll start paying the $9.99 a month. And I'm looking to keep it because there's no point in really getting rid of it because for what you're getting for $10 is not bad. And I mean, even if we're doing it for free, you can create playlists. You can listen to a song. Let's say you listen to Jay-Z Big Pimpin'. You set up a radio playlist that plays songs similar to Jay-Z's Big Pimpin', and it's pretty much like its own generated radio station. So it's generated just like that, and then even better, no commercials. So just something to think about. I know that was like a random ramble about techie, but it was mainly to just address the fact that MP3 files are gone. And reverting away from MP3 files, matter of fact, probably going before cassette tapes, Twitch did the unthinkable. Twitch always goes the extra step. And I know I'm always like the Twitch advocate. And most of you all may or may not know, but I do stream. I do gaming. I do live streams on Twitch for games. Believe it or not, I'm looking to carry my platform into Twitch as far as podcasting. Haven't really gotten fully into it yet for personal reasons. And I want to do, I need things to kind of work out on my end first to do so. And of course, we got to cross that bridge when we get there. But in hindsight, it's a big deal with what Twitch is doing right now. Well, they're doing a lot of big stuff anyway, but what Twitch has going on now is kind of a cool thing. If any of you know, there is a station that comes on TV that is still a local airwaves known as PBS, Public Broadcasting Services, I think is what it stands for. If it's not, someone will correct me, but I am not trying to miss it on purpose. But PBS was known for having a show that had 886 episodes of a very known individual known as Mr. Rogers. And what Twitch has decided to do is show all of the episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on their stream. So they have a Twitch page for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood dedicated to just showing episodes. And I'll be the first to admit, I love it. I was coming up as a kid, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was kind of like my learning curve of life. They, talked about different things on the show. He had different guests come on. They would always do the trolley to go through the town and talk about different stuff going on. But they were to the point, the reason they're doing this is because they're to a point where there's a possibility that they're going to be cutting funding to public broadcasting, which is going to be done by our current president, Donald Trump. And because budgets are so tight involving this, Twitch decided to kind of take on from a technical standpoint or a technological standpoint to raise funds for possibly trying to get those budgets, at a stable place. And we'll see, as of right now, as it's stating, they've raised just a little under 5,000. Now this is as of, let me make sure I give you the correct date. This is as of Tuesday. Now today, of course, is Saturday, so they may have raised even more since then. But they have also a little section where you can call in and you can leave a message stating how how the show impacted you, things of that sort. One other part of it, two things. Number one, if you subscribe to the page, you get emotes. You get emojis or emotes that can be used on any channel that are related to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Then the other part of it is they're wanting other streamers to host Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood's page. And out of those who host it, 100 of those followers or members of Twitch have an opportunity to get a Twitch cardigan. And if anyone knows Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he was always known for wearing the cardigan sweaters. So they'll have a sweater that's going to be purple, and it has the Twitch logo on it, and it gives the retro look of the Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood feel, or Mr. Rogers itself. It's big because this part, it's not going to be in the store that I have, but if you want to do research on it, you're welcome to. He basically was very involved politically in working on getting funding as well, because he was, I'm not going to say he was a politician per se, but he would address the government on every aspect in trying to get funds for public broadcasting. So I just want to share that information. That was kind of like that was the thing. I was like, I have this story and I want to share it. I didn't remember whether to share it or not. But yeah, that one was one I definitely didn't want to leave out or miss. Now, our artist spotlight this week is one that's near and dear. It's going to be a reality because I did not realize, in thinking about it and looking at picking this group, that they did a lot in the music industry, and I'm going to be very vague. I don't want to sit here and give them 30 minutes of information because they have a lot of stuff to happen. The group, of course, is known as the Bee Gees. Many people know them for singing the song Staying Alive. I'm trying to think of some other hit singles they did that most people would know. Their group initially started, so their group initially was known as the Rattlesnakes. They moved to Redcliffe in Queensland, Australia. Then they were in Crib Island. As time progressed, members of the group had passed. Two of the brothers had passed, and they're all brothers. I'm sorry, let me make sure I add that part. Maurice had passed in 2003, and Robin died in 2012. Robin died due to cancer, and Maurice passed in 2003 at 53. And it was a big deal with Maurice's passing, because at that time when it occurred, this is before he had even passed, Michael Jackson made an appearance there, participating with them. So their group originated in 55. They were, like I said, the brothers were Barry Gibb, Robin, and Maurice Gibb. They were at their hometown of Hugh Gibbs, their father's place, and they kind of brought a group together. Like I said, they were called the Rattlesnakes. And in 58, their older sister, they immigrated to Redcliffe. They began, kind of raising pocket money by performing, doing little shows here and there. By 1960, they were starting to come on TV. They were known for doing the song "Time Is Passing By," and from there, their career just catapulted. Like I said, their big hit is always going to be known as "Staying Alive." They expanded even more. They had more members, join the group over time. I know this is going to be one of those heavy stories, and I'm saying this because I'm being honest. I did research and did prepping with this podcast, but this is one of those I was mainly kind of looking at it as I have always known and addressed and looked at the Bee Gees as a good group that wasn't really talked about a lot, especially during the disco stage. Let's see if I got anything else to give you, because I'm saying this because I like to say it. I use, Wikipedia is not really the greatest source for looking at stuff, but sometimes they bring up a lot of things that you can know about a song. About a group. And they did one of their songs they did was on the Grand Theft Auto soundtrack. I can't remember the name of it, but that was they did perform that. They did kind of break up and not really doing the music at a certain point. Let's see. From Queen, Brian May stated that, "Of course I was and am a huge fan of the Bee Gees' creations and music. Undoubtedly at the pinnacle of songwriting considered over the last 30 years, is it? My fondest recollections are not of the S&F days, which were really a rebirth in the Bee Gees' popularity, but the early groundbreaking songs." And let me make sure I give you the accuracy with that. They were, and also Beyonce even was able to give credibility, saying that the Bee Gees were an early inspiration for her, Kelly Rowland, and Michelle, which kind of makes sense. I mean, they were kind of in that similar scenario. We loved their songwriting and beautiful harmonies. Recording their classic song "Emotion" was a special time for Destiny's Child, and they did do a lot of songwriting as well. They got in '99, the Isle of the Postman office unveiled. They got 6 stamps honoring their native son's music. In '78, following the success of Saturday Night Fever, which was the SNF, and the single "Night Fever," Reuben Askew, who's the governor in Florida, was able to make the Bee Gees honorary citizens, and all of the brothers were appointed commanders in the Order of the British Empire in '01. And in February of 2013, there was a statue unveiled of the Bee Gees, as well as unveiling Bee Gees Way, which was a walkway in honor of the Bee Gees in Redcliffe in Australia. They won 5 Grammy Awards for Album of the Year, and they they won quite a few awards. In the 70s, they won the Grammy Awards for Best Pop Vocal Performance by a duo for Saturday Night Fever, "How Deep Is Your Love," "Staying Alive," of course. Album of the Year one was Saturday Night Fever. Then the Bee Gees single or album was Favorite Pop Rock Band in the late 70s, early 80s at the American Music Awards. Then the Brit Awards, they did Outstanding Contribution to Music, and Hall of Fame Award in 2004. Saturday Night Fever won there as well. And then they had musicians who were considered members of the band, such as Colin Peterson, Vince Maloney, and Jeff Brickford. And they had quite a list of albums. The Bee Gees sing and play 14 Barry Gibb songs: Spicks and Specks, Bee Gees First, Horizontal, Idea, Odessa, Cucumber Castle, 2 Years On, Trafalgar, To Whom It May Concern, Life in a Tin Can, Mr. Natural, Main Chorus, Children of the World, Spirits Having Flown, Living Eyes, ESP1, High Civilization, Size Isn't Everything, Still Waters, and This Is Where I Came From. And they did perform in a couple of films as well. They did films, and they did were in a few television series. They were oddly enough on Space Ghost, Coast to Coast. And yeah, that's the story with the Bee Gees. Sorry. I got through that better than I expected. Sorry, y'all. I apologize for that. But yeah, that's their rundown. And I believe we will now get to my favorite yet most annoying part of the podcast. It's not really annoying, it's just honest, because it's a story that you just don't want to do, No, actually, I do want to do it. I'm saying it like that, but I really do. This is a story that I want to address. Now, I typically only have one ass of the week, but I was able to do research and do some news searching a little bit, and I found out we have two. So I'm going to save my sports ass of the week for a moment, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about Betty Shelby, who was a Oklahoma police officer, was a female Oklahoma police officer who was involved in killing a unarmed black man last year in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She was acquitted on those charges. Now, as of September, she was released. She was out on leave, on non-paid leave. She was acquitted, which means that she'll be able to return to work on Monday. And they were doing that. It's tough because now the case is unsolved in the sense that the jury, they kind of addressed it in saying that the jury really couldn't come to a consensus agreement on what happened at that time. So because of that, that was what caused her to be considered as acquitted for what had happened. But it doesn't mean that they still can't, that legal actions couldn't be taken further for the family, any family and friends of the victim who was shot or was slain. Let's see if I can get the brief breakdown. Shelby has been on unpaid leave. Jury found that Shelby was not guilty Wednesday, although the foreman said in a memo filed with the court that jurors weren't comfortable with the idea that she was blameless. That's the toughest part about it too. When you're trying to be a juror and you are engulfed with media, you don't know what's going to happen if you do decide to put that option in motion of saying that she was in the wrong, things of that sort. And let's see. And this was the individual who was shot. His name was Terrence Crutcher. He was 40 years old. Crutcher's family. Crutcher was shot after Shelby approached him in a city street where his SUV had broken down. Shelby had said he fired her weapon. She fired her weapon out of fear because Crutcher ignored her commands to lie down and kept reaching into his pockets. Prosecutors said she overreacted, stating that his hands were in the air and he wasn't combative. Part of which is confirmed obviously by police video, and the foreman argued in the 3-page memo that if Shelby had attempted to use her gun before Crutcher reached for his vehicle, it quote-unquote could have saved his life, and that potential scenario was seemingly an option available to her. So it was almost like she was reacting on sheer impulse. And I know I always say I don't do politics, but I'm going to be transparent in saying this. It's tough when a circumstance or a situation occurs and a person thinks with their instinct or with their impulse, and that impulse is just way off as to what would be the logical thing to do in that circumstance. And this is a perfect example of that. And this is what happens with a lot of what we call a lot of what the media has defined as police brutality, or as we've seen as police brutality. I don't want to say as it's been defined because that's not what it is. It's reality. It's realistically police brutality where individuals are being killed. And I don't want to just target it solely as blacks, because the black story, what I think it is, and I'm going to say this because I feel like it's not even me being transparent, being biased, and not forgetting that I'm black, because I don't. But in the media gives more attention and more conversation piece to the black communities, but it's never talked about the white men or women who were shot by police, in vain. I think the toughest part about it is because lately, over the past couple of years, you've seen more of it gain or obtain more traction behind it. And this story is no exception. And I closed it and I need it for the story. I'm going to make sure I have the link in the description in regards to that. Other ass of the week. And I'm supposed to do the Game of Zone story, and I didn't do it. I'm not going. Senton was like, do I really want to do these Game of Zone stories and talk about them each week? And then I was like, yeah, I'm good. I don't want to get into it because it's so broad and so much that goes on involving them. So I was like, I just won't address it. But what I will address and what I will talk about is the LeVar Ball saga continues. As I mentioned, one of the toughest things with LA getting Lonzo Ball is that they would have to deal with his father. And his father is a media mogul. His father has, when I say absorbed 15 minutes of fame, he is not playing. He's gotten every bit of it and not looked back one bit. And it's almost like a bad instance of saying, can you blame him? On Fox Sports 1, there are two hosts. There's Colin Cowherd, and the show is called The Herd. It has Colin Cowherd and Christine Lee. Well, recently, and I guess this is a more updated story to what the initial story stated, Christine Lee has been getting death threats after the confrontation with LeVar Ball. And I don't think it was more so the confrontation that's caused the death threats. It's more than likely her response or her rebuttal to it after it all went down. Let's see. I want to make sure that I get the actual terming of what occurred. Who is she to come? Blah, 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 blah. It's have some. So mainly the reference said, Lay said her objection boiled down to the complete lack of respect showed to her by Ball. Have some respect. Don't threaten me. Don't make personal jokes. Don't mock me, and don't say you're not going to look me in the eye. If he wants to come on and look me in the eye and be respectful, he can still disagree with me. I'm okay with that, but I would not tolerate what he did yesterday. It was just a... Okay. Even so, Lay admitted it was time to redesign the set of The Herd, which places her almost behind guests while they talk to Cowherd. And she brings up, so that's a good point. And I guess this isn't me defending sides or making it like what happened was or wasn't justifiable. When they have them in their seating arrangements, it's as if they're talking to each other from separate sides of the room. And when they're talking to each other, that interaction of those two is fine. But when they were talking, and I guess when this interview occurred, a statement was addressed and something was brought up. And when she asked a question, he's hearing her behind him, and he just gave his honest feedback about it, and she got upset. And it caused a rift, of course, because it's social media. Social media is going to take sides as to who they think was right and who was wrong. I don't really think there's a right or wrong to it. I just think you don't. What I've seen, and I'm saying this because this is what I've observed. I personally feel as though LeVar Ball is not media oriented. He's media oriented as far as for ratings, for randomness, for noise, for attention. But as far as the consistency and actually having something worth talking about, no. He's a face. He's a brand. Obviously, he's Big Baller Brand, which oddly enough could have been Ass of the Week Part 2 because he it's stated that they may not have the rights to the Baller Brand because there's another company in Germany who has that same name, and that's caused a bit of a rift in the media world as well. But the Ass of the Week moment for him, I would have to say, is because if you're on a television show, or if you're on anyone's show, and I'm emphasizing this, and this almost goes back to what I stated at the beginning of the podcast. I don't have an issue or a concern with someone agreeing or disagreeing with what I do or don't say, but don't be rude about it on my show. And this is probably going to go away from the Ass of the Week story, and this is just going to be a general know-how. And I'll even state this to go on record as to why because I believe I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, or it may have been when I first did the first recording and it was gone. I don't have a problem with a person disagreeing with me, or I don't have a problem with a person disagreeing with what someone says in an environment or in a group, but be respectful of people's opinions. I think for some reason, or I think for whatever reason, we feel as though I don't agree with what you said, and because I don't agree with it, I'm going to give my thoughts to it, and I'm going to be nasty about it. Well, being nasty about it doesn't make or generate the best communication or conversation between you and the persons or the people involved. And when that occurs, then you end up having this generation. I ain't gonna say generation, but you have this gap, or you have this space between someone that shouldn't even exist. And I think we get to that point strictly because we don't want anyone else's opinion to matter but ours. When in reality, everyone has a voice, everyone has a way of how they feel about something. That doesn't mean that everyone's voice or everyone's way is the right way, but if everyone gets their thought out and it's addressed and talked about in the right way, then it makes it for a more fair and balanced conversation. You don't get that when, like, a person, in a person like LeVar Ball's case, and I'm saying this because I've seen it in the observation, and I could be 100% wrong. I feel as though he only feels that what he's saying is the true statement, and what everyone else is saying about him or is being addressed doesn't exist to him. Yes, he doesn't have to agree with it. He's not obligated to agree with it. I'm not stating that he has to agree with it, but at least listen. And for him, he's spending less time listening because he spends more time ready to attack and ready to address what someone said. Well, I don't think what you said was right about my son, or I don't think what you said about me is right. And I know you talked about me on numerous times on this show. He has not been taught to be prepared for the media. And I think the point that we learned that was before the shoe situation even was thought of. If you go back to when they played in the NCAA tournament, I believe it was the Sweet 16, and they played against the Wildcats. It was the game against the Wildcats. When they played that game, after the game, it may not have been that day, it may have been the next day, it was some point, LeVar Ball addressed and stating that we didn't win the game, or we didn't play good because they have a bunch of white boys on their team, or on our team. Now, whether he said that unintentionally, or if it was an accidental statement, or however it was perceived or addressed, as a person, as a brand, you have to be able to think of what you're saying before it. Like, you have to have someone who's able to sit and talk with you. Going back to, they made the story with the whole Joe Budden and Lil Yachty talking to each other. Joe Budden understood it because he saw it, and I even observed it because it's a true statement. Lil Yachty was kind of prepared and was PR prepped properly for that interview. Because if you go into an interview and give the wrong statement or make the wrong response, it's gonna cause a kickback. It's gonna generate friction, and sometimes media friction can be a good thing. Sometimes it can be a bad thing. But I'm gonna say this, and I know I'm like going into way off left field and not anything to do with what the ass of the week was. But I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna make this a clear point to my listeners. No media is bad media, or no attention is bad attention if you're getting attention. And here's what I mean by saying that. If you have people talking about what you're doing, whether it's good or bad, the bad part of it, yes, you don't want to hear or know that people are saying bad things about what you're doing, but they're talking about it. So those bad things that are being said can be utilized as constructive criticism or ways to improve on what you're doing. Now, if you take the opposite road of it and you say, well, you know what, I understand what y'all are saying, but I don't want to hear it. I'm going to do what I want to do because I'm going to do me, and this is how I do it. Then it's you utilizing what's been provided to you and taking it and going your own way. You can only, I guess the nicest way of saying it is, you can only help a person as far as they're willing to be helped. And if a person just wants to kind of do it the way they've been doing it, you can't change the obvious, and that's just how it is. So that's kind of what I want to leave as like a lasting or a closing statement or a cap off for the podcast. But I just want everyone to know, thank you all. Like I've been thanking people, I've been tagging folks, I've been showing information, leaking a few images, things of that sort. But any small thing that you have or haven't done to help the podcast get to where it is, like, thank you, I appreciate it. I know one of my friends was telling me, and I talked to her about it the other day. She was like, you always say thank you, like, I know you're appreciative, you show it. And I'm like, I do show it, and I can't change that, but I still like to personally say it because it's just who I am. So anyone who's done anything small, whether it's giving feedback, listened to anything, thrown advice, took a picture, liked a comment, listened to a show, it's all appreciated, trust and believe. So I'm gonna cap it off here. Like I said, hopefully my co-host will be back next week. I'm looking to get some more topics prepped. I'm hoping and I'm looking forward to possibly playing NBA Playground so I can give you all a review of that. The game has been out for a while. I'm going to let the saturation and the newness die off. Give some Injustice some attention because I was initially going to address it today, but I've only kind of watched it through streams, and it's streaming wise, you don't really get the same view as you actually playing it, so I'll leave it there. But as always, y'all be good. It's Saturday. If you haven't gotten out and enjoyed the weather, I'm looking outside and it looked nice, so I'm gonna go ahead and see what it's all about. But until next time, y'all take it easy. Later. Did you make it to the end of the episode? If so, I do appreciate you listening and tuning in. These episodes get more and more valuable, and I do appreciate everyone taking time to sit down and listen to the episode. Whether you're actually listening to it once it's uploaded on Spreaker.com/Brate Podcast, or if you're downloading it and listening to it on your own convenience. If you want to check out any previous episodes, just check out that page. And if you'd like to inquire or provide any information or feedback or suggestions toward the podcast, please send those emails to passpodcastbt@gmail.com. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Enjoy your day. Have a good week and be positive.